Hey everybody, Cone here in the garage on a rainy day, going to do some work on the 240. I know it's been a while, but I've been getting settled up here in North Carolina and getting things going. Got myself a new mower, the world's tiniest mower. It is ridiculous how small the deck is on that thing. But let me tell you, mowers are expensive. So now that I got that done, it's time to start putting some of those pennies towards the cars. I've had something in mind for the 240 for a long time, and that is engaging something that has been built into the ECU forever, but never had the ability to work, and that is launch control. So launch control basically is, or as the kids say, two-step, is the ability to have a secondary rev limit that is engageable with a switch so that you can launch at a specific RPM, so you can have nice consistent launches. For a turbo car, that can be important to get the car spooled up. Obviously, this is a supercharged car, so you won't want to sit on a limiter for long because you're just introducing heat into a system that doesn't need any more heat. I don't know that this is something I will really use all that much, but it's something that I know it can do. If you don't know much about the 240, then I highly suggest going and watching my introduction video to it from a while back. It'll overview a lot of the stuff that I'm going to briefly cover here, but the car has a MS2 Megasquirt 2 3.0 system in it. That computer has the ability to have launch control active. However, this is a hand-built unit. It is not a pre-built or plug-and-play system. It is using a custom wiring harness, and because of that, and it wasn't designed originally to use launch control, that stuff isn't active on it. So what we're going to do today is pull the ECU out, inspect it, see what internals it has. I did have that ECU apart not too long ago. You'll remember that I fried the injector circuit when we were getting the car back together. So I learned about the nitty-gritty details of inside of that ECU. But at the time, I just wanted to repair it. I wasn't caring about adding anything to it. I need to go in there today, see what the circuitry is, see if we need to add a circuit for the launch control stuff to work. No, seriously, look at this thing. It's so adorable. It's just cute. Look at that little itty bitty deck. It's not even wide enough, like it might just barely be wide enough to sweep out to the tires. Well, hopefully it lasts me a while. I recently had this computer out. Oh, well, it's not even remotely tight because I was investigating to see if this was even going to be remotely possible. Any of you out there in the video business, how do you mount your lapel mics? I see like the roadkill guys and whatnot. A lot of people seem to have their mics under their shirt these days. How are they mounting those under their shirt? How does it not pick up a bunch of noise that way? I say this because I find wearing a lapel mic while working on car stuff, you basically just fight the cable getting caught on everything all the time. And there it is. All right, so I've got here a bunch of stuff that used to be like super scary looking to me, but these days, I don't know, I've gotten so familiar with it, it's pretty normal. But in short, this is the entire computer system for the car. It's pretty simple in comparison to, well, that Audi out there or any modern car, really. This is as bare bones as it gets as far as a computer system goes. We're going to take this apart right now. If you buy a plug-and-play unit, if you buy a pre-made one of these, which are, I don't know, they're like $500, something in that range, it'll already have that wired in and it'll be ready to go. Even back when they first started making the plug-and-play ones, it wasn't, but now it is. So when you buy a kit and it's like the MS2 3.0, it's going to say, hey, this has launch control. The reality is it software-wise has launch control. It has the ability to have launch control. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's ready to go. So first off come the two little feet for the plug and then the 4 screws around the side of the case. So when it comes to launch control, you basically need a few inputs for it. You need an input so that the ECU knows what the engine RPM is. Obviously, it's already going to have that. That's part of the, running tune for the engine. Well, you also are going to need some kind of input for a trigger for the launch control and flat shifting. That typically comes from some kind of clutch switch, and it's usually a ground switch, meaning when the circuit is active, it has grounded a circuit within the ECU. These ECUs have plenty of available pins here to do that, but they aren't by default hooked up by screwdriver because it's unnecessary. They're unused in any normal situation. So in this case, I don't think it was hooked up. It could have been though. So now on this side of the ECU, this is the reference side, so those lights give you reference to what it's doing, and the plug is where you would hook up a laptop. So what we want, what launch control is going to do for us, is it basically engages a secondary rev limiter at a certain point whenever this circuit that we are adding, or hopefully are adding, is active. All right, I can tell already that that circuit is not included within this as it stands. So this is the extra board, essentially. That's not 100% true. This is all simplified, but this is where a lot of the brains of the operation sit. If you were to buy a plug-and-play unit, this looks very different because this is all one chip that plugs directly into the board. This one is a chip that plugs into the board, but it's uncovered, basically. This is all exposed and open. So you could go in here and modify these circuits if you wanted to. Thankfully, we don't have to do that. All right, if you look at where my screwdriver is pointing, you will see some sockets that say spare on them. Spare sockets that go to these pins. And those are what we are going to take advantage of to have our correct ground loop for the launch control. If we slide over to here, so over here we have two lines basically of grounds within this ECU board. On the right side is a bunch of 5-volt references. We need those as well in order to properly power this circuit. All right, what we're going to do is carefully push the board out here. We don't want to apply too much force to it, but I mean it's not as fragile, I think, as even I originally was worried about. But there is a lot of stuff here you could damage just in applying too much force. But there it goes. All right, this is the messy side of the board, as I call it. This is where a lot of the customization comes in. Before you start going, wow, Cone, that looks like crap. They all look like this, for one. And for two, I didn't do this. I did add this loop in right here. That is where we had to repair the injector circuit. But we do need to get to this side of the board, because you can see right here, right there is JS11. And JS11 is currently unused. All right, I hope you're ready for the world's most expensive chalkboard. So I'm going to draw out basically what we're doing here. Okay, here is what we're looking at in kind of a small scale. And say hello to my two little friends here. These are 2.2K quarter watt resistors, and these are 1N4001 diodes. Okay, JS11 into the resistor into 5-volt source of the board. On the ground side, we have a diode, silver line on the bottom, hooked into the ground side. We're going to hook this circuit into the other side of that diode, and then another diode comes along, facing the same orientation, in between this circuit, and this one then goes over to one of the unused pins on the ECU. So that's where those spares were, which will be a pin connected to a wire that will be grounded through the clutch. We'll get there when we get there. We need to modify the ECU first. All right, I got everything I need laid out here now, and I'm going to, as you can see, I've put the board back in its case a little bit, just to give me a little bit of support as I'm working on it. I need to remove this daughter board or accessory chip here. And as I do that, I'm going to make note of its orientation. So basically the pillars down. Interesting. So it seems like at some point, Grant, who assembled this the first time, must have put a lead into JS11 at some point, but then removed it. So there's some solder that's collected in there. That might be okay. I could probably just heat it up a little bit and then push our wire through. Sometimes it just takes a little ingenuity. So I'm using vice grips to hold the safety pin, soldering iron to heat up the safety pin in order to heat it up enough to melt the solder and push it through. And it worked. It's a pretty narrow hole, but I think I can get a wire through it. All right. I suppose the electricity going out isn't a problem. Oh, man. All right, I see the wire sticking out the other side, so I should be able to send that home. A little thick, but it's there. All right, that should work just fine. That clears all the wiring and everything. So we're in business. All right, so at this point I got both diodes in place, about to do the resistor. The good news about these connections I'm doing right now is that its connection to the board is actually irrelevant. We're just using the board to hold the wiring in place. Pretty good penetration. But again, penetration, not really a big deal here. So now what we need is this wire to the bottom of that resistor. Then a wire from here to here, and then a wire from here to over here. Someday I'll own a good pair of wire strippers. Today's not that day. So spare 4 is underneath the map sensor. Ruh-roh. I should be able to just remove it, peel it forward a bit. All right, I consulted the world's experts on everything, the internet, and they suggested to just solder it through the top using low heat. Should be okay. All right, that actually did go pretty darn well. I take back almost everything I said about you, internet. So, here we are. So we have the wire from JS11 down to the resistor, which is into the 5-volt socket there. We have this hodgepodge of the wire at the other end of the resistor, and then the wire going to the diode, which is hooked into a ground. Then we have this short little wire into my best soldering work, which is connecting the two diodes together. Both diodes have the silver facing down. Bottom diode has a wire on the bottom socket going over to spare 4. We must put this back in place, or this engine won't do nothing. And then slide our board back together. Reassemble everything, and then we need to take care of the wiring in the car. All right, now it is time to look at the clutch pedal and figure out what kind of sensors we have on there. So this was originally a cruise control car. The car has been modified pretty extensively since then, but it should have 2 switches on the clutch pedal. One for the neutral start safety switch, and one to disengage the cruise control whenever you push the clutch in. What I'm hoping is that clutch disengagement for the cruise control is a grounded circuit, and we can use what I think is this wire. We can use that circuit in order to enable the launch control. We're going to start here by taking out this kind of knee pad panel here for the 15th millionth time in this car's history. gives us a little bit more access. Okay, so up there, kind of mid-frame, you can see a off blue, kind of pale blue switch with no plug in it. Well, that plug is the one that's hanging down there, and that should be the switch for the cruise control. Now, I don't know how this car was wired originally. It could be the case that that is grounded from the factory. So whenever that switch is disconnected, basically, whenever you push the clutch in and that switch is extended, that grounds the circuit. It could be that way. We aren't using a plug-and-play system here, so using the factory wiring basically makes no sense here. If this was a factory wiring car and we did have a plug-and-play unit, then it would be wired for that, ready to go, and we could just use that circuit directly with our ECU. For us, we need to make ourselves a new circuit. These are usually just a matter of unscrewing them. This one's super easy to get to. The one on the back side that always fails in S13s, you S13 owners, you know what I'm talking about. When the pin for the back sensor goes bad and your car won't start, yeah, those are a pain. This one, not too bad. Oh, the brake pedal ones like to go too. But this one, I think, actually just rides on the pedal itself. It does, yes. So it just grounds, or it just bottoms out on the pedal. So whenever the pedal is up, it hits this and the circuit is changed. This is also how you can kind of reset how far up the clutch pedal goes, if you were ever wondering on how you could do that, if any of that was even remotely in focus. All right, so now that is in place, and you can see the wires coming out of it. So one of those is going to a nice ground, and the other one goes over to the ECU side. So the ECU side needs a pin. It needs a pin in the connector to go into the ECU. Also, just a moment while I'm under here. So you see all this stuff up here. This is one of those things that I think beginning tuners and people modifying their cars might fall into a trap. It's happened to me. Make sure you get these wires nice and secured and out of the way. Obviously, right now, I'm just doing a test circuit, but it's really important to go ahead and like zip tie or properly, clip away these wires under here, because all it takes is one of those to get wrapped around your pedal, and you're going to have a real bad day. All right, now that the ECU is all buttoned back together, I actually already put it in the car and tested it to make sure, the car still ran. Not that I was worried or anything. I was pretty worried. So that should be the ECU side done. We still have to take care of the car side, though. So remember the switch that is going to be our ground interrupt. Well, it needs a wire on the ECU harness because the original wiring harness didn't have this channel on it, so it's not in there. So I've got to open up the connector, and I believe it's going to be a solder 2 connector in there, which should be pretty simple. And I've already discovered which pin it is. Unfortunately, on my original diagram here, it's not going to be on this. So this one is only referencing the wires that are part of the harness that runs the car. So a bit hard to tell if this is in focus, but up at the top here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That one right there is going to be our pin that is spare 4, which is pin 6 on the DB37 connector. So let's go take a look at that. All right, so down there you can see our connector. That is the main ECU plug, and you can see it's got 2 flatheads on it. I think that is like a clamshell piece, and it'll come apart. Okay, interesting. This is a pin style. Ah, okay. This is not a. Ooh, it does come apart. Okay. It is not a solder style at all. Very interesting. That makes this both easier and harder. Well, it means I need to order some parts. I don't know if you can see, not much light to be had, but I'm going to need the tool to insert a female pin on a wire. Okay, well, there's a stopping point for the day. All right, it's a new day out here. I got myself some more parts and stuff, and I think I have everything now ready to get this all set up. So the ECU is completely buttoned up. We left off right as I was getting ready to look at the switch for the clutch pedal. I did go ahead and test that switch, and it does indeed work in the way that we need it to. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that apart right now and show you what I mean with that. So here's our switch right here. This is the switch that would, from the factory, control the cruise control. It would disengage the cruise control if you ever pushed the clutch in. So what we needed from this was for it to be a solid connection when it is released. If this works the opposite way, then it's not going to work for us. It's probably pretty hard to see, but if you look in there, there's a couple blades, and if we have our multimeter on a continuity check, it should beep at us now. So beep, and then no beep. And there we go, that's good to go. So this right here is what I was actually waiting for. These are female pins for that connector for the ECU. Unfortunately, that wiring harness isn't super easy to just take out here, so I'm going to construct this out here, and then we'll put the pin in the car. If you're ever thinking about maybe doing your own wiring harnesses and whatnot, and you see this kind of contraption on Amazon or eBay or whatever, don't do it. Get the other kind that look more like this. I thought I'd give these a try, and I'm not really a fan. So all we need to do is basically make this. You can't even really see what's going on here. I got pins that are very small. The pin like receiver here is the same, but you can get them that have a different gauge wire receptacle. I don't know what to call it, but basically a different gauge wire. But if you look on the back of the ECU where the plug is, the part where it plugs into the pin, pretty much the same for all these, and it's retained within that plastic bit that's still in the car. And then we're going to have one that's on pin 6, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It will go right there. All right, I'm going to attempt to show you what this process looks like. So we got a little stripped wire, and then we have a pin, and that stripped end goes into the pin, and you want it to actually go into, twist this together a bit more, because we want that to go into the pin just a little bit. There it goes. So now it's all ready. It's going to crimp. Oh boy. It's going to crimp right there, and then these two we can crimp down by hand. All right, how did we do? Looks okay. I'm going to give it a little crimp further out too. Right, double crimp. Got a pretty solid connection there. And then this all gets housed within that plastic connector. So it's pretty safe as far as getting pulled out goes, but I'm just going to use a pair of pliers to squish in the other two little bits there, and we'll be good to go. All right, well, now that that's taken care of, it's time to break out the trusty old laptop. This is the laptop that I've just always used with this computer. It has the tune on there. Everything's good to go with it. So I keep using it, even though it's been through a lot in its life. But as long as it still keeps working and powering on, I'm going to do it. Don't worry, I do have the tune backed up to other sources. So without the ECU in the car, and without it being powered, I'm not going to be able to get like live telemetry or anything from it, but I will be able to burn a new tune to it. So there is the USB adapter, and then USB adapter into the computer. And then we'll bring up Tuner Studio. All right, open last project. This is our project file here. And you will see it says offline. When the car is running and you have this plugged into the computer, all of this will give you gauges. But up here at the top is where the tune stuff is. So we got basic setup, startup idle, enrich, extend. I think we want advance. And no, maybe it's under extend. Yep. Launch control. Okay, so this is where we need to tell the ECU what it should be looking for and what parameters it should be using. So you can see launch, you can see JS11, and then you can see the parameters that we set as well. Of course, I'm recording off a screen, so it's going to look all weird and freaky, but hopefully you can see everything that you would need to see. Although you shouldn't be using this as a tuning guide or a tutorial, because I'm just a guy on the internet trying things out. Honestly, this whole project is just to get more comfortable with modifying and creating stuff on these boards, because I want to be able to do this stuff completely on my own eventually. My main goal is to be able to do a Megasquirt computer from scratch on a project car. Either the Datsun, if the Datsun ever gets out of title misery, or I'm really looking for an S12 200SX to do something like this with. So this is kind of just a feeler project to get me more comfortable with doing this stuff. All right, now we're going to come over to the Megasquirt DB37 connector grounds and U tutorial here on DIY Autotune, who do all of the Megasquirt stuff. And we're going to find our mouse. We're going to scroll down. There's our connector. So on the top row, the 6th pin over is going to be spare 4. So that's what we need. We need pin 6 from the top left with the narrow side down. Pin 6 is spare 4. And there it is. There's our connector. And you can see from the top with the narrow side down, we're going to go 6 over, which you can see has nothing in it right now. Hard to show, I'm sorry. But it is just as easy as that. They make a tool to help you press these down into place. I don't have that, of course, so I'm just going to use my fingernail. Like a genius. Alright, so how I have it now is that thin wire into the harness. I need to run that through the actual harness connection eventually. But this is that big chunky wire that I was talking about earlier that I have hooked up to the sensor. This is a bunch of grass that is collected in the carpet. This is what holds most of the car together, but everything else is set and ready to go. So I'm just going to, for now, connect these two together temporarily to make sure that the circuit is working, and we'll start testing this system to see if we've done anything right or horribly wrong. All right, well, let's go ahead and see if this thing still starts up for one, and then I'm going to roll it back and get the exhaust outside the building so it's not killing me. Nope, still unhappy. Oh boy. Haha! Guess who forgot to put the vacuum line on the map sensor? A little bit better. Just a little bit better there. Ah, now we gotta clear out all the fuel. So what I've gone ahead and done is gotten a little bit of heat into the car and just letting it sit here. We're going to give it a try. It should kick in around 3,000. But it certainly did not. That was certainly above 3,000. All right, now with the clutch out with it opposite, I want to give it one more try and make sure. And no, it went above 3. Okay, so back to the laptop. Let's see if we got any more settings or if it didn't burn. I do apologize. The car is going to be yelling at us the whole time, but yeah, I didn't remember that you needed to have the ECU powered in order to do this. So we are now going to send our offline values. And now that should be set. Let's look at advanced, extended, and launch control. And that is on. Let's burn that just in case. And now I'm going to leave the laptop plugged in here and give this a go. Perfect. So believe it or not, that's the calm one. That's the calm version of it. All right. That's a success. It works. All right, let me drop the clutch. Let's make sure it goes above 3 with the clutch out. Perfect. Sweet. Now I just got to clean everything up. Well, everybody, we're back on the bench. So we left off at the point at which the system had started working for the very first time. Since then, it has not been working. So it worked for 2 times there, and then at that point I wanted to tidy up my wiring and I wanted to try to change some options. So I did those 2 things. I tidied up the wiring and I went ahead and changed a few options in the launch control. At that point, the system was no longer active. So I reversed all of my changes and it was still inactive. Some 7 to 8 hours of diagnostic later, it's still not working. So I've tried running the entire wiring in the car new. I've repinned the connector new. I've also been inside of here and done a lot of inspecting and testing of ohm levels and all sorts of things to see, what was going on. And it seems it's possible that we've had a diode failure on one of the circuits. If it's not that, then boy, I'm at a total loss because I've pretty much redone absolutely everything with this system at this point, and it still just can't get it to activate. Unfortunately, I also can't quite seem to find anywhere in Tuner Studio to see if the circuit is active or not. I can turn it on, I can turn it off, but there's no indication that it is armed or if it is working. So I'm kind of flying blind here. I don't really know what's wrong, and I don't really know if it's working or not. So that's why I started testing things on the board. So on the night that it stopped working, I went in here and I decided to replace this diode as it was giving me a weird reading. In that, I made an absolute mess of my board here. So today, I'm going to go in here and try to undo some of my mess. And I'm actually going to replace both diodes with brand new ones of the same spec to try and basically start this circuit over, clean everything back up, start it, the point at which everything was working. Everything else has been checked. Everything else seems to be working. But these diodes, they should give you a little bit of resistance one way, but on the opposite way, nothing. This one is doing that. This one is not. It is letting voltage go back and forth. The leading theory as of now as to why that might happen is because the spare 4 line that goes to here, what this is reading for is a ground. What this wants is a nice chassis ground for this to be active. What I think might be possible is we might have caught some back voltage from the car itself into this line, which backfed voltage into here and probably killed that diode, if that is what's going on. We've had voltage spike issues with the car before, and that's something that we need to look at in the future, figure out if there's some kind of shorted wire on the car, if we have insufficient grounding. I'm not sure what could be causing that. But that's the point we're at now. I'm going to go ahead and take this apart and try to clean up our wiring and basically redo what you've already seen. So I'm not going to make you sit through it, but I'll show you how it looks at the end. And hopefully it looks better than it looks now, because it's atrocious. Well, after all that, I'm really not too hopeful because I'm getting the same readings with the new diodes in there. Basically, when I test these before installation, this one, it works where one way it drops to like 500 and the other way it overloads. This one, also would do the same. But now once the circuit's together, this one doesn't overload in one direction. So it's like in this direction it gets up to like 1500 and the other way is like 500. But this one still acts the same, acts like it should. I don't know why that is. I don't know enough about electronic circuitry to really understand. All I know is, believe it or not, that looks way better than it did before. So I am going to put it back together and give it a try. But like I said, I'm not too hopeful. I'm worried that the problem might be further in. It could be that the JS11 circuit is bad altogether. That's not an impossibility. We do have other circuits available to us like JS7, etc., but I'd really rather not, because that involves doing like jumpers and all sorts of fun stuff across the daughter board. So for now, I'm going to try and reassemble and see what we get. All right, so I think what I'm going to do at first is I'm going to load the tune, and I'm going to put the launch control on. I'm not super enthusiastic about it. I don't think that we're going to see any good results here, but you don't know till you try. All right, so currently it is on. Okay, so let's go ahead and start it up. I don't have it plugged in right now. I don't have that circuit activated. Actually, let me go in here, and let's bring the number down if it's high. No, it's at 1500. Okay, that's what I want. I'm just going to leave the limit real low so that we don't have to... I already got the car warmed up a little bit so it's not dead cold, but let's just see if it's working at all. All right, so obviously right now it should do nothing. And that's true. So now what I'm going to do is I hooked up a separate ground to be able to plug that circuit into to bypass the switch altogether and to find a new area that I know is a good ground to try and just see if it works. So there would be right now no switching in this, it's just always on. But it most certainly is not on. Just revving right beyond it. And I know that the system still works because if I go in here, let me turn the car off, but then turn the computer back on. If I go in here and I put that on JS10, which is a circuit that's already used in the same way but for a different system, so it's not switchable. And if I put that on JS10 and I hit burn, and if we start this thing up, we will see that it still has the ability to work. Like, the tune is working. Something about the circuit is no longer working. And what that could be, I don't know. I'm kind of at a loss right now as to what it could be. So I was taking the ECU out just to, try something else. And I was like, well, maybe I should check the continuity of the circuit. So I just did. And when I was pulling the connector apart, I realized the pin that we inserted seemed a little loose, and I was able to pull it right out. So I've just reinserted that to try and make sure it's good and solid. Check the continuity, and it's good. We're going to try that, but I swear I've tried that a dozen times already. So, again, who knows? Sweet baby Jesus. 8 hours later, we finally got it back. Unfortunately, I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was the pin in the connector or if it was the diode inside of it, but it is currently working. Now, that's with it hard grounded, so it's always stuck at 1500 here. I did learn that we can't do spark cut on this, so we can't shoot flames. Sorry, Internet. We are using basically a batch fire ignition that can't do that. In the future, I would like to go to LS individual coils, but that's miles down the road. So it's going to be fuel cut only, but it does seem to work. So now I think what I'm going to do is, instead of using the original ground, I'm going to run a wire back over to here to where I know we have a solid ground, and then try it with the switch again. And once we try it with the switch, and if it works with the switch, then it's back to cleaning up wiring again. Alright, so I've got it wired back up with the switch, but with the switch to a new ground. Let us burn this new tune, raised it way up to 3100 or 3000 again, because that's kind of where it should actually be. And let's see. Well, that's not a good sign. All right, so check to make sure the pin's still good. Check the ground. So no, we've had a failure again. So now I'm curious to inspect the board, see if we can find a repeating failure point. Because I just went through the whole sequence again. Everything's exactly as it was. Same exact thing again. It worked the first time, and then after that, never again. Well, took the ECU apart, checked all the circuitry, checked all the diodes, the resistor, everything. Everything is fine. I have no idea why it seems to only work once. I do now wish I had tried it back to back. Like when it worked the first time, I wish I just shut the car off, restarted the computer, and tried it again. Because now I don't know if that would have caused a failure or not. So I regret not doing that. The good news is the ECU still works. Everything is still working. It didn't fry the board or anything like that. So it was honestly a fun project, but a frustrating result because I just can't fathom why it's not working anymore or why it just works one time. I'm going to try it again here. I just put the board back together, put everything back together, and we'll see what we get. I've got it on static ground. He's dead. Okay, seriously, just one last thing. I wanted to try having it disconnected and then connecting it while the car was on. My thought there is maybe it needs to see a difference in voltage. It wasn't true, but it was a nice thought. Oh boy. I went ahead and tried a thicker gauge wire on that pin. As soon as I changed it to JS10, launch on there just right away. Change it to JS11, launch disappears. So it's got no signal on JS11. So I'd once again have to rebuild that circuit, but I think that's it for now. Not exactly the happy ending, but that's working on cars.